Climate change is a market failure. You can figure out your daily carbon footprint, and you can start putting a value on it. Can China save the world? 谢谢大家，很高兴啊，跟你们呢有这个机会交流一下，把我们的可持续性的研究。我今天来讲的就是英语啊，可是如果你们有什么问题啊，可以提，这是中文的。所以我的题目就是中国跟全球的世界有什么关系啊？把这个1.5度的一个挑战，所以或是我们英文来说 ，Can China save the world? I think China would like to save the world. Can it do it? And what kind of challenge do we have here? How many of you know this game? Have seen this movie? Anybody recognize it? Yeah, this Squid Game. So it's a very scary movie, right? It's a movie where we start off with hundreds of people and we eventually get down to one. And that's kind of the climate challenge right now. We're starting off with billions of people and eventually we may get down to one. And it's going to play out over the next couple of decades. So you get to be part of this game. And the question is, what kind of chances do you have? Are you going to make it through this game? Who's going to win at the end of it all? Who's going to get the big prize, which in this case is basically survival? Let me explain what I mean. So we have to do a lot of stuff if we want to get out of climate change. These are some of the examples. We need to have 3 billion electric vehicles on the road by 2050. 3 billion with a B. We need to have 2.5 billion heat pumps by the year 2050. We have to have about 120 times the amount of carbon capture that we have today. We need 8 billion tons per year of low carbon steel, chemicals, ammonia, fertilizer. We need about 7 times the amount of renewables power that we have and 4 times the total amount of power. 4 times. We have to build 4 times the energy system of what we have today. Times 4 again. That's a lot. And finally, we need about 100 times of what we've got in terms of clean hydrogen. And we need all of this in the next 20, 25 years, which in energy system terms is tomorrow. Guess who has to do this? You. Because basically all this stuff is made here. 60% of manufacturing of clean tech capacity is in China. Where 90% of solar panels and wafers, 60% of wind turbines, almost all the batteries, the LFP batteries, fuel cell trucks, hydrogen electrolyzers, and so forth. So if anybody is going to solve this problem, if anybody's going to win this game, it should be China. Because we're in video, I wanted to show a few pictures. So last year, China installed about 260 gigawatts of solar power. The rest of the world combined did about 160. So China installed about 6 times the amount of solar gigawatts as the rest of the world. And that's up, of course. China used to install about 25% of the new capacity. Now it's more like 60%. China is certainly doing well there. If we look at wind, similar numbers. China installed about 74 gigawatts of capacity last year, and the rest of the world combined did something like 40, and the US did about 5. The climate revolution is happening here. Electric vehicles, China sold 8 million electric vehicles last year. I hope everybody here, if they don't buy one, will buy one soon. They're very cheap now. The rest of the world combined did 5 million, and the US did 1. China's looking pretty good. But here's the thing. We're just getting started on all of this. We've done less than 10% of what we need to do if we want to win the game. The good news is we can do stuff like solar scaling. We grew solar production by about 12 times between 2005 and 2015. So we took whatever was in 2005, multiplied by 12 to get to 2015. So we can do something like that. And we need to keep doing solar like that. We need to have another 4 to 7 times the solar capacity that we have right now, same for wind. But there are other things which need even more. If we look at batteries, we need about 80 times the amount of batteries here. We need 20 to 30 times the number of EVs. And then we have the stuff we don't even really know how to do. So hydrogen, we need about 160 times the amount of green hydrogen that we have right now. And then there's things that we just are clueless about, like carbon removal, so 150 times that. So our challenge is to take what we've got now and just grow it really big for a long time. That's our challenge. Now, China is good at these kind of things, right? China is good at big stuff. We like doing big stuff. The problem is that this is big stuff, but it's not really very profitable. So here we have the issue, is like, so anything in the red is in the red. It's not profitable. And anything in the green is attractive. And as you can see, there are a few things in the green, some types of solar, some types of wind, but most of it's in the red. Now, the good news, if you look at the slope of the lines, this is showing the difference between 2020 and 2030, is that it's coming down. So we're getting better. But still, this is not necessarily a profitable thing to do. So China likes to do big things, but it likes to do them when they're profitable. So how do we get profitable? That's the core of it. If we can make this profitable, then we can do it. If we don't, then should China save the world? But you know, you don't get a choice about that. Carbon doesn't really stay in one place. It goes all around the planet. But yeah, this is our real issue, is only 10% of technologies are in the money today. Even when we see what's going to happen on the technology front, the costs are still not where they need to be. So solving this is basically going to require us to become really, really good at scaling up before it gets profitable. We're going to need to find ways to get ourselves bigger, even though we're not making as much money in the short term. Because we know the only way to really lower the cost is to get bigger. So as we scale, as we get larger, we get cheaper. So batteries, solar, hydrogen, heat pumps, wind, we see this trend everywhere. But we have to get bigger first. And that's our real issue. So we need to find ways to get bigger. And this is where, can China save the world? China can't save the world by itself. China has to save it with the rest of the world. I don't know a single Chinese company that isn't trying to chew high right now. I think that's our challenge, is how do we work together with the markets, the opportunities that we have around the world, to collaborate, to get bigger so we can make money and we can deploy this stuff so we can save the world. That's the only way out of all of this. And that's going to take money. We think that the total requirements for financing of the green technology revolution is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 trillion a year globally. That's a very large amount of money. Today, we're spending maybe $1 trillion a year globally. And almost all of that is a subsidy. We need to add another $2 to $3 trillion somehow. And we need it in power, we need it in mobility, we need it in buildings. And that's, again, not going to come just from China. That money is not sitting in China. Some of it is, but not all of it. Most of it is sitting in the United States and in Europe. So if we are going to create a new energy system, we're going to have to do it together. We're going to have to find the sources of wealth that are going to, in their own interest, fund this technology. Because if they don't do it, well, maybe that wealth won't be there either. So it's really it's in the world's interest to work with China. And it's in China's interest to work with the world. So what's going on here? Why isn't it happening? It doesn't seem to be. Well, I'm going to close with 3 remarks. The first is that economists would say climate change is a market failure. We don't value the climate. How much is the climate worth to you? Do you see the climate in your paycheck? Can you put a number on the value of the climate in your retirement savings? And now, of course, what happens if you don't have climate? Well, you may not have retirement. So that's what a market failure is like. So we know it's important, but we just don't consider it. We just don't have it as part of our economic equation. So we need to build an equation that includes the cost with the carbon, the offtake, with the money. So that's the first thing. And we need to do that all around the world. So I think the single biggest opportunity that we can all do is start to think about how, for us in our companies, do we put a value on our impact on the climate? What are we doing? How do we know how much it is? How much carbon do you consume every day? How many people here know how much carbon they consume or generate? You can get that, you know. Alibaba can do it for you. So you can figure out your daily carbon footprint, and you can start putting a value on it. And you can make yourself your own personal source of climate saving the world. So China saving the world starts with you. Today, now. That's what we have to do globally, of course, not for just people, for companies, for countries, for places. And yeah, of course, some places are going to have more opportunities than others, and we need to connect those. So when we talk about supply chains and global, I always get frustrated by the conversation about security. Because everybody says, well, security comes first. Well, I don't know about that, honestly. I mean, climate security is national security. If you have a smoking wreck of a planet, you're not very secure. So go look at Venus. It's not a really attractive place to live. So that is, you know, I think first. Climate comes first, and the planet does not care about our politics. So we need to do this globally. So that's first point. Second point is we need to do it now. If we don't scale this up, even before it's profitable, we are not going to make it. Again, the climate doesn't care about our politics. Math is math. You will find it. It will happen to you. And, you know, whether it's floods or fires or drought, living in a hotter, wetter world is no fun. So we're going to have to find a way now, and we're already experiencing what it means to have a hotter, wetter world. Let's try to bring down the cost before we can even get at scale, and even if we can't bring down the cost, let's start deploying at scale. So how do we build then the execution capability? How do we build 6 billion, I think it was, EVs, 3 billion EVs. So, I mean, that's a massive execution capability, and I think China, of course, has a very specific role to bear there. China can really do a lot of that. 我们的政府的比如说 implementation capabilities 操作性比较强. So that is a second point. We can't wait on this. We have to go now. And then finally, this idea of saying, well, you know, all of this stuff, it seems to be subsidized. It doesn't seem profitable. The government is doing it all. And I'm sorry, government just doesn't have that much money. The $1 trillion that we're spending a year, that's about it. The government is not going to spend more than that, because otherwise your taxes will go up a lot. And anyway, your prices will go up a lot anyway. Your electricity prices are definitely going to go up. So how do we find ways to tap in to the private wealth, what we call blended finance, to de-risk the business cases and put the financing into those critical technologies before they break even? And again, I think this comes back to the idea that climate is a market failure. Because what is all that money worth if you don't have a planet? Now, if you're a long-term investor, if you're an insurance company, and you're supposed to invest your money for the next 30 years so that your policyholders will get money back in 30 years, you have to think like this. You have to think about what is the asset that I can invest in today that will still be there in 30 years, and it won't be underwater, or it won't be burning. That's climate risk. So Somehow we need to take that observation saying, well, this is a very real risk, and we want to reduce that risk. And we're going to reduce that risk by investing in safe green technology, and that's going to cost money, but it's worth it because it reduces that risk, and that's how we're going to finance this. Well, that system hasn't yet been developed, and I think China can again save the world by developing it. China has the world's largest carbon markets. China's carbon markets are entirely separated from the rest of the world. There's no connection between anything that happens in China and carbon and investment and anybody else in the rest of the world. This is practically the definition of a market failure. There are many, many investors outside of China who would be very happy to have access to the Chinese carbon markets. And the Chinese carbon markets could and should be put together so that they can create an even bigger investment opportunity. So that's just one example of how China could save the world by creating an attractive investment opportunity globally, right here in Shanghai. So I encourage all of you to sort of work together and apply to the Shanghai Green Finance Society and work with the Shanghai Climate Exchange to start making that happen. Because this is what it's going to take. You guys are going to have to get engaged. And with that, China can save the world. So thank you very much.